In 2022, Oregon football should run Colorado off the field, even in Boulder this season. But that doesn't mean there aren't a lot of things to look for in ways that Oregon can grow from last season. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, D1 play-by-play broadcaster and lifelong Oregon Ducks fan. Thank you for making this your first listen or your first view of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks, which is why, if you haven't already, you should like, comment, subscribe wherever you're listening to or watching the show. I appreciate everybody out there who has done so already, and I appreciate all of you continuing to bear with me here. This is another one, the third to last, that is being recorded ahead of time. Eventually, I'll be back, and I'll be back well before the season starts, get you all ready for everything Georgia related and such. But we're continuing to take a look at the schedule because there's a lot to look at with all of these teams. And I want you to have an idea of what to expect from everybody going into the year, and then we'll get even more in detail, in depth as the season goes on and we get up to these games. And oh my gosh, I can't wait. And one guy who always gets the juices flowing for Oregon football is with me today, Rian Winter at SportsChat503 on Twitter and YouTube. Ryan, good to have you back once again, my friend.
Love it. Spencer, what up? Let's do this thing.
So Colorado has, let's just say, not been a sparkling addition to the Pac-12 in the way that Utah has. They've brought some geographical diversity. They've brought, I think they got to the men's March Madness tournament.
They've been a tough out in basketball.
They've been a tough out in basketball, right? So solid there, but on the football field, you just can't look at it any other way other than saying they've been bad. They've had 2 seasons over 500. They did have one where they got to the Pac-12 championship game in 2016. I was there. They were not on Washington's level, but again, that was at least a good, respectable Colorado team. That's also the only year that they've beaten Oregon since they joined the Pac-12. I'm pretty low on Colorado this year. They were 4-8 in 2021. They had a lot of young guys playing, and I think that there's room for growth in that sense. Carl Durrell has talked about that quite a bit. The problem is they lost 4 guys who were going to be major contributors coming into this season. Oregon, the beneficiary, getting Christian Gonzalez. Mekhi Blackman, another corner, goes down to USC. Brendan Rice, their best receiver, and Jarek Broussard, their second best running back, all leave the program ahead of this year. This is a game I feel needs to be one where Oregon fans can gloss over. It doesn't mean it will, but it needs to be one where Oregon fans can kind of gloss over it. The team shouldn't, but the fans should be able to not have to stress. It should be a relaxing Saturday where you just kick back and go, yep, Oregon won, nothing to worry about there.
Yeah, and we love that road game. I mean, that's a tough place to play, up at Boulder, always a tough place to play.
Sneaky good environment in Boulder.
Running Ralphie. I mean, yeah, they have history. The Beeve fans or the Husky fans or anything else, they can't throw that at them. They've never won a national championship. Colorado's been there, and they're a good team. But you're right, they have not really promised or done much of the promises of what they thought they were going to bring to the conference. Because I did think that Colorado was, when Colorado and Utah got added, I thought Colorado was going to bring something. Obviously, you said geographically it's relevant, but, this is a team that, this year, a little bit maybe of a trap game for Oregon, but this is a tough one for Colorado. I mean, Colorado's schedule this year is wild. They've got a tough one. And when they play Oregon late in the year, they play Oregon in November, they have the onslaught for them. Those last 4 games for them are brutal. So it's just, to me, it looks like one of those years. You're right. Oregon should win, but you got to strap them up every weekend. You never know what's going to happen. And up there with, you have a little bit of stuff going on with altitude. There's always, I think they make more of a deal about that. I think it maybe affects the basketball team a little bit more, but these guys, they'll be huffing and puffing a little bit, but hopefully you get a good lead and you close the door on them, unlike what you did last year.
Yeah, last year's game saw a big lead. The offense, actually did what it rarely did in 2021. What we've all been griping about for the last year and are hoping Kenny Dillingham can improve upon as the offensive coordinator with Bo Nix. There were downfield shots. I went back and watched kind of a rerun or so of the highlights on YouTube, and I'm watching Anthony Brown complete downfield passes over and over. And guess what? The Ducks put up 52 points on a Pac-12 opponent. Not a very good one, but not an Arizona level bad one. Or certainly they were better than Cal. I think they were better than Cal last year. The Bears just kind of caught fire at the end, but I have really low expectations for Colorado this year. I don't know what they're going to get out of the quarterback position. They do have a new offensive coordinator in Mike Sanford, who should be better than what they had. He comes from Minnesota with PJ Fleck, where they won a good number of football games. So in theory, that's an upgrade there, but I just don't see it from a personnel standpoint. I mean, you're looking at a roster that I don't think they have one transfer, the wide receiver transfer from Baylor, who was a 4-star. I don't think they have a 4-star guy on the offensive side. They just are not going to have the bodies here. I think this is one of the biggest talent mismatches Oregon's going to have all year.
I would agree. And, it felt like they just had a lot of guys transfer. It felt like there were certain teams that had more guys transfer than they brought in. It felt like Colorado was one of those teams. Brendon Lewis last year did fairly well. He played okay, here and there. Their team wasn't that good.
Yeah.
But, they said JT Shrout coming into the thing had a really good fall and then got injured right before the year. And they think maybe they're going to bring back this quarterback competition again. And, when I did my preview, I didn't really talk about JT Shrout that much because, I just didn't really think of it as that big of a deal. But I do think, if you look at last year, they said he was in the running before the injury. So maybe that comes out. But there's very few guys who are going to return a starter from basically every game you had last year. So, I don't think Lewis is that great, but you're right. They get tested early and often in their schedule.
It's brutal.
Dude, they're 3 non-conference game. I mean, Air Force is their easiest game. That's going to be a tough game for them.
Yeah, they've got TCU at home. They go at Air Force and at Minnesota. That is a gauntlet for any Pac-12 team, including Oregon, by the way, because Minnesota is an 8-10 win program in the Big Ten. Colorado, gosh, I feel like they got to find a way to win. They're not going to win at Minnesota. I do not see that happening.
I don't think they beat TCU in the first game.
I don't think they do either. The Horned Frogs are an 8-point favorite. The game is in Boulder. But if you're Colorado and Carl Dorrell, you got to find a way to win one of those games. But I feel like that could be a little bit even more of an advantage for Oregon. The personnel gap is pretty severe. I mean, the Ducks have got multiple NFL guys on the roster: Justin Flo, Noah Sewell, Christian Gonzalez is probably going to be an NFL kind of guy.
Took one of their better players right
yeah. Yeah, it's just like it's tough. Like I feel bad for the Buffs, and maybe we'll have to eat some crow if the Ducks get upset here. But of all the games that you would look at and go, oh, this could be a trap game, you can't sleep on them. This is just not one that I feel that way about. I'm more scared, Ryan, of Arizona than Colorado.
I would agree with that. I think Arizona had a better offseason. It feels like they're trending upward. It feels like Colorado's trending downward. And I think they were pretty close last year. I know Arizona was much worse, but on paper. But I don't know. I feel like Arizona's got something going. They got the transfer quarterback. Delora. I think they've got a little something going. They had a great offseason. You talked about T-Mac. He's going to make a difference as a freshman. There's a bunch of teams out there that I think have made improvements. I don't think Colorado's one of them. And we talked about Cal last time. I don't think Cal's one of them either.
Yeah, and Colorado, sometimes it might seem like they just need to bulk up a little bit. Maybe, Ryan, they should check out some Built Bars. If you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, see what I did there, everybody? You're depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. There's a new flavor. Ready, set, go. It's delicious, indulgent cookie dough. I didn't actually mean to make a rhyme there. I apologize. But cookie dough chunk puffs, they're only 160 calories, a whopping 15 grams of protein, all the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it. Plus, it's healthy for you. You can go get your bars today. Order a box at built.com. Use the promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. It's hard for me to look at Colorado, who had a defense that was torched by an Oregon offense last year that, as we saw in several instances, wasn't hard to hold under 30 points. I mean, Cal, that is a perennially good defensive team, but is recruiting in a similar vein as Colorado in that you're not bringing in a flurry of blue chip guys. They held the Ducks to 24 points in Autzen Stadium, and Oregon was able to, get Ty Thompson some snaps here, and he didn't look very good in those limited snaps. At least the throws that he was able to make, and one of them was an interception, and he just didn't quite look fully comfortable and ready, which I'm sure for a lot of Oregon fans out there is kind of a microcosm of the limitations that Mario Cristobal had as a coach, a good one though he was. But I mean, Ty stepped in there and threw an interception, and then Colorado goes down and scores, and then Anthony Brown has to come back into the game. So I feel like when you're under a coach that doesn't blow teams out, and then you were blowing this team out, and ultimately, semi let them back in where you put the starters back in, which is disappointing because you'd like to get those second teamers as many reps as you can. You'd also like to not have to play your starters every second possible because you're just risking injuries and whatnot. But there were a lot of good things in that game. Anthony Brown threw the ball pretty well. The receivers were more involved than normal. Troy Franklin had a touchdown. Devin Williams had a touchdown. Like Seven McGee made some nice plays. Cardwell ran the ball well. Like there were a lot of good things there. But the area that I look for growth here, Ryan, is not if Oregon wins this game, because that should be a given, right? If Cristobal was on the cusp of blowing them out, which almost never happened, then Lanning and company should at the very least be able to do that. And I hope Dan Lanning can allow fewer than 29 points to what should be a pretty downtrodden Colorado offense as a whole. But what I'm looking for in this game from Oregon is, can you do what Chip used to do to teams? That's what it should be. And I think the only games where you look at the opponent and evaluate them up and down and say, yeah, that's what should happen here on Oregon's schedule, I think you got 3, right? Maybe 4, depending on how Washington performs this year, but they'll probably be at least competitive because it's a rivalry game. But Eastern Washington, Colorado, Arizona, these are games that just should not be close. You have a better roster. Like, these are the instances where you look at recruiting and say, this is why you recruit. This is why we talk about how many 4 and 5 star guys or high 3 stars do you have compared to the other team, because these are the games where it should make a difference if you have the right schematic approach. I think Oregon needs to be able to, they can show a sign of growth from the previous coaching staff to me. And I wonder if you agree with this, if they go into Boulder and have the reserves playing for the last half of the fourth quarter.
Oh, I completely agree. And I would say that for the Washington State game too. I mean, I think that you could put technically on that list of teams that you expect to win, or teams you expect to beat. I would say Washington State and Cal should be on that list as well. And going to Washington State is going to tell you, yeah.
I'd say Cal more than Washington State. I think the Cougs are solid.
I think Washington State's gonna be good, but they're in a transition. You're a team that's expecting big things. If you're Oregon, you start the year at Washington State. You start your league play at Washington State. Tough place to play, but you get them early. I would love to see you talk about like the big changeover between one year to the other. I would love to see the BYU game not be that close. So I mean, if you're really putting pen to paper, you should beat Eastern Washington handily, even though they're a good team on their level. And then BYU, that should be a real signature game. That should be a game that you come out and you showcase what you have against a quality opponent. Not the same kind of opponent that Georgia is, but a quality opponent, an opponent that did really well against Pac-12 teams last year and that has a future in the Big 12. An opponent that's worthy of your respect, and always has been. When I was a kid growing up, Oregon played BYU when they were really good, when Ty Detmer was there, and they had a great first half of this thing. I'll never forget how loud it was there when they got this sack on Ty Detmer. I think it was the second or third series of the game. They'd already sacked him twice in the first quarter, and the crowd went wild, and it's just that's the kind of respect you should always have for a team like BYU. That's why it's a big game on the schedule. So, yeah, I think Colorado fits somewhere in that, Cal underneath Washington State zone where, yeah, you want to see them win. You want to see your starters get out of the game. You want to see the second, third string, fourth string just eat. You want to see guys get touchdowns and get yardages and play a kind of a more free, loose brand of football, instead of it being as, we tighten it up. Oh, we're up by 2 touchdowns. Let's just run the clock. I liked Chip's kind of idea of, hey, let's score another touchdown. Let's score another
Yeah.
touchdown. See if
Like
they can
let's run
stop
them out.
us.
Let's run them out of the bill. I think that's one of
Why
the
not?
biggest differences between Mario and Chip, who both had 4-year runs at Oregon. Both were very successful in their own right. Chip obviously more so, but that's one of the best 4-year runs Oregon football will probably ever have. I don't think that that's repeatable,
I think a lot of
frankly.
teams would love that.
Yeah, I mean, you
I mean,
play in 4 straight BCS now, New Year's 6 games. You
yeah,
win 2 of them and are that close to winning a national championship. Like that's as good a 4-year run as you're going to find in college football. But one of the biggest differences, and I just thought of this because of what you mentioned about how Chip loved to, go. He loved to attack at the end of quarters, end of halves. He didn't want to wait, right? Right.
yeah.
Mario,
20
Mario,
seconds left
Mario
on the
would want to.
clock.
Yeah, Mario would want to wait. Like my favorite moment during the Chip era was 32 seconds inside their own 5. Musburger and Herbstreit are talking about. There's no way he's going to try and score
Oh
again,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
boom, play action, 4 verticals. Let's go.
yeah.
Like that sort of mindset. But I think that's one of the biggest things that I'd like to see. I mean, there are a number of game day execution things from a coaching standpoint that I'd like to see improve. That would lead me to believe that this staff is, more capable in some senses than the previous staff. That probably has a little bit of a recruiting advantage, but I think you can have a higher overall ceiling as a staff for the Oregon football program if you're able to, be a little smarter schematically. And the end of halves. I mean, go look at but there are so many examples where Oregon's end of half play calling approach, they didn't seem like they knew what they wanted to do.
Right.
Like they wanted to hand it off and bust a 30-yard run in order to make a big play. It's like either run out the clock or go try and score. But it always felt like they were in between. And to bring it back to this Colorado game, that's one of the things I'm going to look for here. Is I'm not just going to be evaluating the players, but the coaches, right? How ready do you have your players for a team that you are way better than, that you're going to be a double digit, probably 20-ish point favorite against on the road? It'll probably be around 16 or 18, would
Yeah, get the
probably be
number.
my guess on the
Yeah,
road. It'd be over 20 in Autzen Stadium for sure.
yeah,
Like, how do you have them prepared? How do you execute? And what do you show in a game where you should dominate?
yeah. I mean, I think you need to show up on defense. You need to hold them to maybe a touchdown or two instead of, like you said, 29 points last year. And then I
Yeah,
think,
that's way too
and
many.
15 in the fourth. I mean, Lord have mercy.
Yeah.
And then the other one is you need to, like you said, capitalize when you have an opportunity. I love the game plan of win the coin, defer, score at the end of half, score at the beginning of the second half. Now you're up by 20. Now you can let off the brake or let off the gas a little bit if you need to. Pull your starters. Your starters are not going to play in the fourth, but you could pull them earlier in the third, even get them more rest. I mean, that's the thing you should be lined up for. And for Oregon fans, I think that's a true sign of a champion. Now, not necessarily a team that is barely hanging on. If you start winning multiple games by 20 or 30 points and you start putting together a great team that you're thinking could be a playoff contender or get to the Pac-12 championship game, that's going to get you excited. Versus during Cristobal era where we were nervous going into the thing like, okay, we won, but what happens if, you won by 1 point against Wisconsin. The biggest win of his whole career is a 1-point win. Where you needed to run the clock. You needed to run, and you need to get that first down at the very end of the game to do it. That one, the Justin Herbert to Juwan Johnson.
Yeah. Though to be
That's a
fair,
little that's a little
yeah,
too close for comfort.
I see what you're saying, but to be fair, Chip's Rose Bowl breakthrough was by a touchdown, right? And I
Sure.
mean,
And you needed the fumble, miraculous fumble, the
yeah,
Michael
you
Clay,
needed the
right?
Aberderis fumble that stayed in. I
Yep.
think in big games when you're playing a big time team that I don't expect it as much. But what I was
No,
thinking
no.
of when you were talking about like, the good teams, the championship caliber teams are able to come in and just run these teams off the field. I mean, how many times I can't count how many times during the Chip era where we're playing some team that we're way better than, say Washington State back in the day before they became a relevant program again. I'd watch the first half, and then I call my friends, be like, "You guys want to play some pickup football? You want to go hang? You want to go get something to eat? Like, what do you want to do? Like, the Duck game's over. Like, I don't need to watch. I don't need to watch everything else because at the time I didn't have the podcast, obviously. So I just feel like that's a really good
Get the
point to
rest of your
make.
Saturday
And
right.
I was thinking specifically last year of the Cal game and the Arizona game. Like, why were those games close ever? I know the Arizona final score wasn't close, but if you watch the game, it
Oh,
wasn't
I
over
did.
late in the third quarter. Why wasn't it over by then? That was an abysmal team. They had lost. They were 0-4. They'd lost 16 games in a row as a program. You were at home. You were in the college football playoff discussion. Why was it close? And
Home
it's not
opener
as
for the Pac-12.
yeah, dude,
Let's
why
go.
was that a close game? It just shouldn't have been. Cal came in. They were dreadful on offense. Why were they able to they only scored 17 points. Okay, but why are you only putting up 24 at home? What do you do? That's what I'm looking for in this game against Colorado is like, can you go on the road and look the way that the other conference champion caliber teams look against teams that they're just better than? Think about Michigan last year. Big
Right.
Ten championship game. What was the final score against a respectable Iowa team? They were better than Iowa for sure because they're in the stronger division. But Iowa was not a cakewalk. It was
Sure.
like 36-3. Like, you got to show it against a respectable team if you're really good. But to be a great conference championship caliber team, when you play a program like Colorado that, as we've talked about, is trending down, that has not been good, has only beaten Oregon once, you don't need to just win this game. You've got to kill them. You got to destroy them, and you have to have a mentality on your roster of that's what we're going to do. Not we're going to go in, we're going to play our style, and we're going to come out with a win, which is how it kind of felt last year, especially. And look, there were a couple blowout wins in. I think the Colorado game in 2019 with Herbert was actually not particularly close. Like, that's what it should look like. That's kind of what it should look like. Just preferably without the pistol.
Yeah, one would hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think you're right. I think the big thing this year is if you want to have East Coast eyes on a West Coast program, somebody's got to do some big things out here. And you got to score, and you got to score a lot, and it has to be amazing. You got to be on Sports Center. You got to really, really go. I mean, you can't just be mundane out here and expect to have respect. You got to go next level. And for this year for Oregon, maybe that's the case. We still don't know how this coaching staff's going to do it. I'm assuming you're going to have a defensive-minded coaching staff that's going to really like the offense to score points. Something tells me that you're going to have the defensive guys hooting and hollering every single time you get a touchdown, and then they know they can go put the clamps on and get the ball back to the offense. And the offense should just be looking at it and say, hey, we got a good enough defense to keep us in it. If we make a mistake here and there, they'll get us back the ball. Let's go out here and let's party. And I think the energy on this team is of that ilk right now. I think they're excited. They're ready to go. They know they have a lot of talent on this team. They're young. They're energetic. They've been through a tragic loss with their teammate, Spencer Webb. They've been through a tremendous amount of bonding. They went through this coaching change. I think the sky's the limit this year. I really, really think this is going to be a big one. And if Colorado's a problem this year, then we've got issues.
Yeah, just like last year. Arizona and Cal were problems, and I remember sweating those games out late at night, and then we won, and then walked away feeling like, did we really win? Like if we're actually that good, is this the way it would look? Like, would you really have to? I mean, not a team that's 500 or just below 500. Those teams were a combined 1-8 when they came into Autzen, and Cal lost by 7. We needed a goal line stand to prevent overtime.
Yeah.
Like, that's the sort of stuff you
Dicey.
just don't have if you're conference championship caliber. And that ultimately played itself out when Oregon got to Salt Lake City and then to Las Vegas and got absolutely smacked around the field.
Yeah.
Let's close with this, Ryan.
Sure.
Is there any way you could see Oregon losing this game? And if so, like, what do you think what would have to happen? Let's leave
Oh, yeah.
out a catastrophic slew of injuries, but
Sure.
let's say the offensive line has, got 95% of its guys or so Bo Nix is there. Flo and Sewell are healthy. Like, if Colorado somehow does this, which I just can't see happening, at least right now, maybe Colorado shocks everybody this season. They go 2-1 in their non-conference. I view them completely differently, and we would reassess how we'll predict this game and such. But right now, it just feels like it's tough for Colorado to be on Oregon's level. And if you're going to win that game, how does it happen?
Well, you got to start with, you got the elevation. You're on the road. Okay. Folsom. It's going wild.
Yeah,
You
it's
got
in Boulder.
Boulder. Right. Dude, you got, it's rocking. You got Ralphie running, slobbered up. She's gained weight. She was a little light last year. She's young. Ralphie's fired up. They return the kick. They're up 7, whatever the case. There's a couple turnovers. There's bad clock management. Like you said before, Oregon doesn't score before half. Maybe they do. Maybe they come out in the second half and score again. I mean, every one of these teams every year is going to be a problem. And you got to respect every one of these teams in the conference. Now, granted, there is a talent discrepancy. I get it. But going into the field this year, they're putting on helmets. They're ready to go. They're going to play hard. And, things could happen. The big thing for Oregon is the questions about the offense. I think if the offense goes out, this is my big thing about the Georgia game. I don't think anybody's scoring more than 2 or 3 touchdowns on Georgia. So you better go out. Georgia's defense is ridiculously elite.
Even with all the guys they've lost, they've got 4 and 5 stars waiting in the wings.
Oh yeah, and they're ready to go, and they want their chance. So if you could score over 20 points against Georgia, that's saying something. And so if let's say you go out and score 28 points against Georgia, and you come out in a situation where you're thinking, you just blow out Eastern Washington, and you play well against BYU. Wow, this is an offense that's really doing some things, but it's all unknown. Let's say you go out to the Georgia game, you score 7 points. Alarm bells are ringing. You go into Eastern Washington, you beat them by a couple touchdowns. You maybe beat BYU in the late field goal or something. Things could get crazy. And, fans are going to jump out of the building if they feel like their team is in some way, shape, or form not living up to expectations. Well, when expectations are this high and they're national championship or bust, it's always going to be disappointing if they win. All you need to do is one game, you're out, especially in the Pac-12 this year. Yeah, I would even venture to say you could have a Pac-12 team that went undefeated, and you could have a team that has 1 loss, maybe even 2 losses in the SEC, and they'd still try to paint some picture, the Pac-12. So I think you need to go out there and just show it all on the field. I think you need to have a huge year. You need to have whoever the quarterback is, which we're thinking is going to be Bo Nix, absolutely going crazy. Front page of papers, the stories of Oregon. Oregon's back, brand new coaching staff. It's got to be that, because if you come out and stub your toe in the first couple games, don't really get off to the big start, you might have some highs and lows during the regular season. You're going to have that. But if you start off mediocre, people are going to be crazy.
I think on the flip side, and I alluded to this earlier, I think I might not have finished my point, but Colorado has got a brutal schedule, and their first Pac-12 game is at home against UCLA, a team that I think will be able to just outscore them on the football field. Like, there's a scenario that's very realistic where Colorado starts 0-4. You could have questions start to emerge about Carl Durrell as their head coach. Like, you could really be, or Oregon could be going into this game against a Colorado team that is just feeling completely defeated and depleted as well, if some guys decide to transfer and leave the program there. I'm not guaranteeing that will happen, but that is just a very real possibility. Just go check out Colorado's schedule. You start, give me a tougher start for anyone in the Pac-12, including Oregon, by the way, than TCU, at Air Force, at Minnesota, UCLA at home. I mean,
and then they have to go at Arizona, which is, like you said before, Arizona's.
I think I like Arizona to win that game.
They play Cal at home, which you would assume would be a good game for them. Oregon State on the road, good luck. I mean, there's some tough games. Arizona State at home, and then you've got Oregon, USC, Washington, Utah.
Yeah, it could be a tough year. I just don't see a lot of wins on that schedule.
I just hope they don't put the hot seat on Carl Durrell. We know what he has.
He's got a new offensive coordinator. They did
Yes.
a staff revamp.
Right.
I think he needs to be given 2 years. Even if this one's a disaster,
He
I
fired
think he should
the
be given
offensive
2
line
years.
coach halfway through the year last year.
Yeah, I think this should be treated as a clean slate, and he should get this year and next year to show that they can have improvement. But we'll see, because I've heard over on Locked On Pac-12, which I host as well, from some Colorado fans that they're getting a little restless about Durrell. The transfers are not sitting well, but we could go all in on that. But we'll go all in all season long with Rian Winter at SportsChat503 on Twitter and on YouTube. Love your insight and our conversations as always. So we'll just keep them rolling.
Thank you so much, man. And real quick, before we go, I heard your advertisement. You a cookie dough guy?
Oh, I mean, huge cookie dough. Cookie dough Built Bars, fantastic. Cookie dough in general, absolutely phenomenal.
I mean, dude, when the wife's making cookies and you see the mixer, you're like, ooh, I'm into that.
That was me miming eating cookie dough. It's the last time I'll ever do that.
Spencer, you're the man, dude. Appreciate you anytime, bro.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate everyone listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.